Abby Wemimo is the co-founder and co-CEO of Esusu, a financial technology platform that reports rental data to build tenants' credit scores while helping poverty owners increase revenue and lower evictions powered by differentiated data and insights. Prior to Esusu, Abby founded Clean Water for Everyone, a global social venture providing affordable access to clean water for 250,000 plus in 6 countries. He also founded a data analytics company designed to gather machine reliable data on NGOs, non-governmental organizations operating in Africa, which was acquired in 2014. Previously, Abby was a mergers and acquisitions consultant at PwC, one of the big 4, where he worked on more than 20 buy and sell side deals valued at over $50 billion. He also gained valuable experience working with Accenture, European Commission, and Goldman Sachs, all names, Abby, that are highly recognizable for our students in places where many of them may want to work. Before we get started, I just want to highlight a couple more things about Abby. His work has been recognized across major news outlets from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Black Enterprise, and Cheddar. He was selected by Queen Elizabeth II as a Queen Young Leader. He was inducted into the Royal Commonwealth Society in 2017 and named to the 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 list among a handful of other rewards, highlights, and recognition. So, Abby, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start the discussion really quickly with a quote from somebody that I've admired deeply, like yourself, Muhammad Yunus, and it goes like this: human creativity is unlimited. It is the capacity of humans to make things happen, which didn't happen before. Creativity provides the key to solving our social and economic problems. And I think this is a good segue into the first question that I'd like to tee up for you, and that is, if you could share with our students a little bit about your personal story, growing up in Lagos, coming to the United States as an international student, founding Clean Water for Everyone while in school, which is fascinating. And then you had the entrepreneurial aptitude and mindset as an undergrad. You know, you spent some time in the corporate space with notable companies that I mentioned. So just walk us through your personal experience and journey, please, to begin.
Jason, thanks a lot for having me. Deeply appreciated, and it's just such a delight to be here with you. My name is Abby Wemimo, and my story started in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria. I grew up, was raised by my mother and 2 spirited sisters. I lost my father at the age of 2, but something my mother fundamentally believed in was the importance of education. My mother afforded my school fees to one of the finest schools in the land, probably the Harvards of high schools, where I had the opportunity to engage with the president's kids and the minister's kids, and really exposed my mind to the destitution of my social position. Fast forward, I had the opportunity to come to the United States after self-studying the SATs, and I moved from 80-degree weather to negative 20-degree weather.
Yikes.
My journey continued at the University of Minnesota, and the focus there was essentially enrolling in business management and just thinking about how I can use my head for business and the art for the world to make it a more perfect place. I started my career working for President Obama's re-election campaign in the northwestern region of Minnesota, and started a venture to provide access to affordable water and infrastructure for the African continent. So that's a little bit about my journey. I'll pause in Minnesota. I know we have a lot to take a deep dive on, but just excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, right? I mean, if you think about many of our students, they're coming from all types of backgrounds, and it's important to understand and hear stories like yours. It's encouraging. We know in the US right now, Abby, there's about 50% of the students are first generation. Many don't have, they can't just pick up the phone, or they wouldn't know how to potentially get a hold of somebody like yourself to get this kind of guidance. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And if you think about what you're doing in the Fintech space, and we're going to talk about that now a little bit with Esusu, your story, right, of when you came here, you're looking, how we all know in the US, one of the big problems with education is the heavy cost and the borrowing, and students are sometimes stuck and laden with debt for many, many years. And I think that was one of the drivers, behind Esusu. When you think about, especially coming to the U.S., not having a credit history, being denied loans from a traditional financial institution. But talk through maybe your experience, right? And the role that your education played in founding Esusu, and when you knew really, when you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur. When did that happen? But also working and starting a company while in school. So a variety of interesting things to touch on in the very early days of your personal trajectory and growth.
Absolutely. So some of the key things, and just to take a step back, for my journey, when my mother and I came to the United States, right, we walked into one of the biggest banks in Minnesota, particularly Minneapolis, to borrow money. We were turned away and had to go borrow money at over 400% interest rate. And my mother pawned my father's wedding ring, and that's how we started our journey in this country. So really inspired by that experience, and as students navigate this complexity and you come from different parts of the world, one of the central questions, at least for me, is, how do you create an environment or opportunities where you fall forward and don't have anything to just rely on? And the way I think about that, in terms of assimilating from a financial standpoint, is this core idea of your financial identity is really, really powerful. And as you evolve in your career, it is crucial to understand the importance of it and don't be caught late when you're about to engage in a life decision, like buying a home or getting another expensive purchase that requires credit. That's where I've sort of focused and molded my life thus far. And that's something that, I can definitely speak to. And what I would hope, at least, students have a deep understanding of.
Well, I'm glad you came to that point, right? Because one of the hottest topics and trends today, of course, is fintech, financial technology and innovation. And of course, students in particular, yes, they're looking at the hottest new technologies and companies, business, but they're also looking at social entrepreneurship, how they can do good, and also where they can go to get some great experience. And of course, there's no better names than Goldman Sachs and PwC for coming out of college or interning and learning in general. But maybe if you could share with the students a little bit, focused on fintech, some of the major challenges that you were seeing in trends across the space. And these can range, of course, from typical growth issues, compliance, et cetera. But would like to hear from your perspective some of these challenges. And then we're going to dive a little bit more into what you said earlier, in particular about what I think is absolutely criminal, having to borrow at 400% interest rates, but the problem you're trying to solve for folks without credit histories, and what students can do to play a role there.
Yeah, Jason. So what students can do to play a role, particularly in the landscape, is really threefold in my mind. So the issues we're dealing with, particularly in the United States, is one of financial exclusion. Over 75 million people in this country do not have access to a credit score or have what we call a thin file. So there's a particular underwriting issue to get people access to cheap debt or just, a reasonable amount interest rate debt. So what students should be focused on from a solution standpoint is, how do we create a more inclusive society where we don't leave people behind? And the tactical way to do that, in my mind, is to encourage students to think beyond just one financial identity source, which is your credit score. Think about a plethora of data, mega trends that can better underwrite risk. So that's one. Number two, as you think about the evolution of financial technology or fintech, the biggest advances we've seen is mobile applications essentially serving as the function of a traditional bank, making it easy for people to transact money as fast as possible and hopefully in a compliant manner. There's a huge wide space for fintechs to meet the letter and the spirit of the law, and paying attention there to make it easy for both parties, because you have a huge financial institutions that's understanding risk. Students coming out of college today can really set themselves apart from a compliance standpoint, cybersecurity careers to move the frontiers of this business forward. I remember when I was at Goldman Sachs and I was stuck in the elevator with the CEO then, Lloyd Blankfein. And one of the things he asked me was, what is the core value that resonated with you? And my answer was, we don't care about the 99% that goes right at the firm. It is 1% that can ruin our reputation we focus on. So as students, as you transition from college, how you can add value in this exploding environment of fintech, really exciting, is how do you make sure these institutions do not lose trust? Or if you're building in this space, how do you create a more compliant infrastructure that's going to outperform and generate value? And then the third piece are the mega trends. What we are saying is the idea of a brick and mortar financial institution, albeit important, is not going to be the norm in the future. We're having big fintech apps and mega all-inclusive feature apps playing a key role in our everyday life. Case in points can be products like Venmo, or you have, Chime. All these products are changing the way we interact from a financial standpoint. What I would challenge students is what is the next frontier after mobile apps? How can you create immersive experiences that moves beyond mobile application and something greater? So this is some white space to think about. And if you want to create a space for yourself in these institutions or do your own thing, these are some of the things you should be pondering on today.
Couple of things to pull from this. So first and foremost, one thing that sticks right out is the idea around trust, right, Abby? You must trust and believe in people, or life ultimately becomes impossible. Right? A huge lift. Like, think about, I'm really glad you brought the Goldman Sachs piece up, and this has been in the news for a while, right? What their role in the Malaysia 1MDB scandal, right? And they recently, I think, had to pay a fine there. But if you do one little thing wrong and you try to sweep it under the radar, it can have a big issue, and it can really stay with you for a long time. But you nailed some of these key points, right? I mean, it's scary to think about the vast number of people that do not have access to a credit score or affordable debt, right? So they're completely getting excluded. Mobile applications and compliance, understanding risk, and then of course Venmo, Chime. I think the young people that we're talking to right now probably have a little bit more familiarity with some of these immersive, more tech-savvy experiences that you've alluded to, and they're ripe to move into companies like Esusu and some of these others to make some of these things become a reality. And that tees up kind of where I wanted to go next is, and you're in a great spot to talk about this because your educational pedigree is vast, right? From University of Minnesota, you've got a public policy international affairs fellowship at Cal Berkeley, an MPA, a master in public administration and nonprofit management policy at NYU, and then of course the leadership work you've done at University of Cambridge. When you think about the work that you're doing and students that want to emulate your path, whether that be starting or working in a startup that is a fintech or working for one of these big firms, what recommendations would you have as they're making some of these tough academic choices and they're staring at majors and courses around international relations and psychology and education and social sciences? Really welcome hearing your insights on this for the students.
My advice to the students would be three things. Think big, fall forward, and don't be scared to fail, and think about the world from a service perspective, not only for your individualistic concerns. So let's think big, number one. You have to understand that you have a limited time on this earth. We are all passing vessels and we all have an expiration date, as grim as that sounds. You know, one of the quotes that I like the most, and I am not Republican, is Ronald Reagan said, "America is too big for small dreams." You got to be able to think big and think and imagine addressable markets or opportunities you're looking at in a very, very macro level, not the micro level. It is important to look at micro things, but as you think about the things you want to have an impact in the world on, you got to think big. Because when you think big, others will follow, be it from an investment standpoint. And at that point, you're trying to really think about how you reimagine the impossible. So that's always been my, core focus. And when you think about that, the next step, right, failures will come. Because in the process, to my number 2 points of reimagining the impossible and thinking big, you will fail. And that's just the part of knowing yourself and realizing your own full potential. Do not be scared to fail. Don't live your life trying to hang on to something or fall back on something. Fall forward. If you have a big idea you're working on that doesn't make sense, but that challenges the current status quo, think big. That's what people like Elon Musk did. That's what Jeff Bezos did, right? That's what made us as a country go to the moon. And now we're thinking about going to Mars. Think big. Think about impacts you can have in the lives of many when you think big and fall forward and don't be scared to fail. And the last part, and that's been the DNA of my life, is to live my life beyond the individualistic concerns of myself, rather to the broader needs of society. Kind of a paraphrased quote from Martin Luther King. But that's how I see my life. Service is my life. And what I care about is all about giving people a fighting chance. Because that's what was offered to me. I grew up in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria. A kid with a funny name has had the opportunity to engage in different institutions and has brought me to where I am today. So just think about how you can have a profound positive impact in people's lives and solve society's toughest problems. And when you do those things, life will guide you to different paths. And ultimately, if done well, you lay on your deathbed without asking yourself, what if?
I've got a shiver going through my spine here, how powerful what you just said is. And if you really take a minute to reflect on it, and all of it touches home, Abby, in a big way. Particularly, we get so tied up with the day-to-day and the distractions, we forget that we are passing vessels, right? And I think, students, especially, I remember when I was a student, you feel invincible. And it's always important to take time, show some gratitude, right? And gain the perspective of the moment where you are at that point in your life. And then thinking big, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we are coming from different societies and communities, and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And you have to, like you said, you got put in an opportunity. Your mom put you and set you up, and then you gave yourself a fighting chance by grinding and working and emulating mentors and others, knowing you're going to experience failures. You grew up around hardships, but you weren't scared of them. You were resilient, and look where you are today, where that's brought you. And I think the message I take away from that, outside of all those things, is it doesn't matter so much what a student ends up picking. Certainly, you should focus on things that will help you get towards where you want to go. But if you pick some of these core areas of study with a focus on business, right? Because that's a core element no matter what you do. The rest of the pieces will fall into place if you think big and you fall forward and you're not afraid of failure. And I guess just to round out our discussion today, Abby, students, regardless of background and what they're doing, What guidance would you give on the last thing is in the journey is about experiences, right? If I'm a high school or a college student and I want to get an internship or a research assignment or get a mentor such as yourself for guidance, what did you do in the early days, and what would you advise students today who are looking for those opportunities?
My advice to students looking for opportunities is to do something as big that a lot more people want to get involved. So I'll give you an example. The way I found majority of my mentors was just thinking big and finding ways we can impact the world. One of my mentors in Minnesota, I met them when I said, why are people dying without access to clean water around the world? Let's do something about it. We brought people from different parts of the city together, from faith-based institutions to educational institutions to my college, and even at the Rotary Club and the Lions Club, hang around together to do something great. So the biggest thing is when you think big from an impact standpoint and you ask yourself the central question of how can we make sure everyone has a fighting chance? How can we make sure someone has a better life, even if that person is not my relative? How do we make sure someone has shelter, even if that person, is not my wife or my husband? So as students, it's crucial. I can't stress this enough. The only way your paths collide with great mentors or investors or sponsors is when you do things that are bigger than yourself, right? And when you work hard, not just with rhetoric. It is one thing to have a big idea and talk about the idea and dwell in rhetoric, but it's also important to put in the hard work and persevere. A lot of people will tell you no, but it is your perseverance that attracts people that want to make sure your dreams become reality. I'm talking about the hard work. Be passionate like how Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are about basketball. That's the kind of passion I'm talking about. Obsessive passion of impacting the world, of reimagining the impossible, of asking why certain people are left behind. That's the kind of things that attract different mentors. And it's not this concept of just saying, look, I'm looking for a mentor to help me in my life. Go beyond that and say, how can I help people with the little I have? And the mentors will come running. That has been what I have done in my life. All the investors we've had is because of the ideas we've thought about, thinking big of how we can help people. And the mentors have come around and helped us move the frontiers of what we're doing forward.
Yeah, I don't remember who said this particularly, but you have not lived today until you have done something for someone who can never repay you. And I think for students that are listening, and students have so many skills that they're learning and just devouring on a day-to-day basis that they can bring to these organizations and countries to have an impact. And I think that's what this episode has really been all about today, is set the bar very high for yourself, aim to impact and support others, get out there, be active, think big in everything that you do, and life will ultimately bring you on a path to where you need to go, right? And I think, right, reach down and lift people up, Abby, is the message.
You got
do what you can to help.
And one thing I would say, Jason, and to students listening, as you go around and trying to think big and have an impact, know you cannot do it alone. The fundamental meaning of the company I co-founded, Esusu, is wrapped in an African saying. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Or if you want to go far, you fundamentally go together. You need a village to be with you. That's where that mentorship comes with. That's where that sponsorship comes into play. And that's where your friends and advisors and professors would also help you. You cannot do it alone. Always remember, if you want to go fast, you go alone. You might crash and burn. But if you want to go far, you fundamentally go together.
No better way to end today's program. And I'm not even going to say a closing statement like I normally would. This was a A real privilege, Abby. Thank you for sparing some time in your very hectic schedule to be with us and our student community. And I really look forward to welcoming you back in the future and continue to follow the success you're having with Esusu and all the work you're doing in the community. So all the best to you and your family. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jason.